with a reverence that bordered on spiritual, describing the mental and physical demands of technical climbing as a form of meditation that connected him to something larger than himself. Miles had been part of that world from the beginning, first as a climbing partner, then as Benjamin's closest friend. They'd complemented each other perfectly. Benjamin's natural athleticism balanced by Miles's technical knowledge, his careful route planning, his encyclopedic knowledge of climbing history and techniques. Together, they'd tackled increasingly challenging objectives, building reputations in the climbing community as skilled but responsible mountaineers. The Park Service vehicle that met them at the ranger station was better suited for the rough terrain ahead. As they transferred from Boyd's patrol car, Vera could see El Capitan looming above the tree line, its sheer granite face catching the afternoon sun. The sight triggered a flood of memories, Benjamin pointing out various routes, explaining the technical challenges, his face animated with enthusiasm for the sport that had defined his life. The scene at the boulder field was larger and more complex than she'd expected. Yellow tape cordoned off a wide area, and several investigators in Park Service uniforms moved methodically through the debris, photographing and marking evidence. The level of organization suggested this was being treated as more than a simple recovery operation. A young ranger stood to one side with a German shepherd, both looking somewhat shaken by their morning's discovery. The dog was clearly well trained, sitting at attention beside his handler, but his eyes kept returning to the boulder where the remains had been found. Boyd led her to a temporary command post, a pop-up tent where evidence was being catalogued and documented. The lead investigator, a woman with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, looked up from her clipboard as they approached. "This is Vera Wilder," Boyd said. "Benjamin Wilder's sister." The investigator's expression immediately softened, the professional mask slipping slightly to reveal genuine sympathy. "I'm Lieutenant Chen, California Department of Justice. Thank you for coming out here. I know this must be difficult. We've recovered several items that might help with identification." Chen continued, leading them to a table where clear evidence bags were laid out in careful rows. The remains were found with considerable climbing gear, and we're hoping family members might recognize specific items. Vera approached the table with reluctance, each step feeling like a betrayal of the hope she'd maintained for 3 years. The items were heartbreakingly familiar: faded blue jacket torn at the shoulder, a climbing harness with bright red webbing, now dulled by exposure, a wallet that had survived years of weather but remained largely intact. She picked up the wallet, hands trembling slightly. Through the clear plastic, she could make out a driver's license. The photo showing a young man with dark hair falling into his eyes in the characteristic style she remembered so well. "That's Miles," she confirmed, her voice steady despite the grief building in her chest. "Miles Andrew Reeves. He had that harness custom-made in Denver when they were planning their first major expedition." Lieutenant Chen nodded, making careful notes. "The remains are consistent with a fall, possibly triggered by rockslide activity. We'll know more after the full forensic examination." "What about Benjamin?" Vera asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Are you searching for him?" "We've got teams working the entire area," Chen assured her. "If he's here, we'll find him. The terrain is challenging, and the recent geological activity has changed the landscape considerably, but we're committed to a thorough search." Chen paused, studying Vera's face carefully. "I know this is difficult, and I'm sure you've gone through this countless times before. But is there anything you can tell us about their plans that day? Any specific routes they mentioned? Any change in their normal patterns?" Vera closed her, eyes, trying to remember details from that morning 3 years ago. Benjamin kept a climbing journal, she said finally. It's at his apartment, my apartment now. I couldn't bring myself to clean out his place after it became clear he wasn't coming back. She'd paid his rent for 6 months, hoping against hope that he might return. Eventually, the financial reality had forced her to accept that. He was gone, and she'd moved his possessions into her spare room. The space had become a sort of shrine, preserved exactly as he'd left it, waiting for answers that had never come. That journal would be extremely helpful, Chen said. Any information about their intended route could help us narrow the search parameters and understand what might have gone wrong. As they talked, Vera became aware of movement on the trail above them. A rider on horseback was descending carefully, followed by a small group of cattle. Even from a distance, she could see that he was an older man, sitting straight in the saddle with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent a lifetime working livestock in mountain terrain. The rider guided his horse down the rocky trail with practiced skill, the cattle following in a loose formation behind him. As he drew closer, Vera could see he was perhaps in his mid-50s, with the weathered skin and solid build of someone who'd spent decades working outdoors. He wore a tan Stetson and a work shirt rolled up to the elbows, and there was something in his bearing that suggested military training. Sheriff Tanner raised a hand in greeting as the rider approached. Afternoon, Vernon. The man Vernon touched the brim of his hat and dismounted with practiced ease. His eyes swept over the scene, taking in the investigators, the evidence tent, the cordoned area with the sharp assessment of someone accustomed to reading complex situations quickly. Heard the helicopters this morning, he said, his voice deep and tinged with genuine concern. Something serious? Afraid so, Boyd replied. Hiker found human remains. Looks like one of those missing climbers from a few years back. Vernon's face creased with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. He removed his hat, revealing silver-streaked hair, and his grey eyes showed the kind of compassion that comes from a lifetime of dealing with tragedy in rural communities. The 2 young men, he said quietly. I remember the search. Terrible thing. Boyd gestured toward Vera. This is Vera Wilder. Her brother Benjamin was one of them. Vernon stepped forward, extending a calloused hand. Vernon Hartley. I own the ranch that borders this section of the park. I'm truly sorry for what you're going through, Miss Wilder. His handshake was firm, his grey eyes direct and sincere. Up close, Vera could see the military bearing in his posture the way he stood, with weight evenly distributed. The alert but relaxed stance of someone trained to assess and respond to changing situations. Thank you, she managed, studying his face. There was something about him that seemed familiar, though she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. Vernon turned back to Boyd, his expression serious. This is the same area we searched 3 years ago, near enough. The landslides changed the terrain considerably. That winter was brutal, Vernon agreed, glancing at the massive boulders scattered throughout the field. Lost half my winter pasture to slides. Had to relocate 200 head of cattle to higher ground. He looked at the investigators working methodically among the debris. My ranch hands move cattle through these trails regularly. We know every deer path and water source for miles. If you need extra eyes for the search, they're at your disposal. Lieutenant Chen had approached during the conversation. We'd appreciate that, Mr. Hartley. Local knowledge is always valuable in these situations. Vernon nodded thoughtfully. I've got 6 experienced men working for me right now. All of them know this terrain better than most park rangers. They can cover ground your teams might miss, check places that don't show up on official maps. He paused, his gaze settling on Vera with what seemed like genuine concern. Your brother, Benjamin, was it? He was the blonde young man. Yes, Vera said, surprised by the specific description. After 3 years, she wouldn't have expected a stranger to remember such details. I remember seeing the search posters, Vernon continued. Distinctive-looking fellow, very fit, outdoorsy type. What? Was he 23? 24 when he disappeared? Vernon's expression grew thoughtful. Any family back home? Wife, children? Sometimes young men that age, they get overwhelmed by responsibilities, make impulsive decisions. The question felt oddly personal, but Vera answered anyway. No, nothing like that. Benjamin lived for climbing. He was single, no kids, no serious relationships. The mountains were his whole world, so no reason to just walk away from his life, Vernon mused. That rules out voluntary disappearance, I suppose. Boyd shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with the speculation. We investigated that angle thoroughly 3 years ago. These boys were experienced climbers, not reckless. Something went wrong out here. Vernon settled his hat back on his head. Well, I'll have my men keep their eyes open. We run cattle through the high country all season long. If there's anything to find, we'll spot it. He looked directly at Vera, his grey eyes serious. Where was your brother from originally? Sometimes understanding a person's background helps predict their choices in unfamiliar terrain. We grew up in Fresno, Vera replied. But Benjamin spent every